I think the debate itself is important, as debates always are, because it refines and defines the issues. And when one has, in fact, a very powerful case, such as the case of equality of the sexes, it tends to come out when one has a proper argument in a way which is probably concealed if people just simply rely in silence on antique prejudices. It was interesting. I was actually president the term before, and I actually moved the motion to admit them when I was president, and we failed on that occasion first time round. The student newspaper Charwood actually had a headline saying Beloff in tears, which showed that I did, I think, care quite a lot about the issue. And then I brought it back as ex-president the next term, and at that stage we managed to get a sufficient majority. It's almost impossible to resurrect what the arguments against having women as members. And ever since they become members, you will find, I think perhaps not a majority of the officers have since then been women, but certainly a very significant amount. And it just tells one how attitudes change over time, usually for the better. In this case, certainly so. I think, in fact, I'm a male feminist. I've always been on that particular side of issues. Indeed, I once received an award from the late Barbara Castle, who was a very distinguished female politician, as you know, for my contribution to women's rights as a lawyer. And I took what I think is probably the most important discrimination case that went to the European Court of Justice on behalf of a woman who complained, actually, that she was being forced to retire earlier than her male equivalent. And it was our success in that case that actually has had huge influence, changing retirement ages, equalizing pension rights, all that kind of matter stemmed from that particular European decision. We don't all have crystal balls, and not all of us are gifted prophetic powers. But I'm sure it'll be a much more feminized world, if I can put it in that way. I think in terms of politics, in terms of the law, in terms of the professions generally, and interestingly, of course, the subject of tonight's debate, in terms of business, where I think it's also true that women are coming through, but perhaps in lesser numbers than one might imagine, having regard to their talents and enthusiasms and the like. And that's why I found the debate tonight particularly interesting.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the Oxford Union. My name is Joseph Durso. I'm the president here for this Trinity term. It's a sort of termly presidency here at the Union, and I'm very excited to welcome you to all this Women in the World Economy event. It sounds like it's a great collaboration with the Saïd Business School, and you've got a sort of really exciting couple of days of events, and this one in particular sounds really interesting, and Michael will be introducing the speakers after me. But my job is just to tell you a little bit about the Union and its history. I don't know if any of you have been here before. Any of you? A few of you, but not many. So, the Union was founded in 1823. So sort of, some of you sort of know your 19th century history. Before about 1850, Catholics in this country couldn't kind of express their views openly in universities and whatever else. So the Union was set up as a place where people could debate about religious issues, about political issues, separate from the university. So still to this day, the Union is completely independent of the university. It's not a university registered society. So we sometimes annoy the universities with the sort of speakers that we invite and whatever else. Some of you may have seen Julian Assange spoke by video link a few months ago. There was a sort of a Muslim preacher called Zakir Naik, who there's a great deal of controversy, a sort of battle with the Home Office about whether he was banned from speaking in this country, and he spoke to the Union by video link. Gaddafi, Colonel Gaddafi, spoken here by video link, and there's a sort of battle with the Home Office over that again. So we're kind of separate from the university authorities, and we exist to promote debate and free speech. We have no sort of political views of our own. We merely sort of facilitate discussion. So every Thursday we have a debate here like this one, where we have a sort of proposition and an opposition and a particular motion. So, for example, 2 weeks ago we had this House remembers New Labour fondly, and we had a Lembit Opik on one side, a Lisa Nandy, Labour MP, a Peter Hitchens, and Ken Livingstone, the former Mayor of London. The week before that, we had Peter Singer, some of you may know, the Australian philosopher, debating about sort of charity and philanthropism. So we do this every Thursday. We also have sort of individual speaker engagements. So through the Union's history, we've had the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Yasser Arafat. More recently, we've had David Cameron, Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan. We also have sort of celebrities, actors, singers, So we've had Saïd, who's the Gangnam Style, came here in October. We've had Shakira. We've had Johnny Depp. So the union has sort of multiple roles now. So it's this debating society. It's this place where you come to debate the issues of the day: religion, politics, business, entrepreneurship, gender issues. We had a big debate about feminism to celebrate the 50th anniversary of admitting female members a few months ago, and now sort of our membership is half female. 4 of the present 5 presidents before me were female, and so we exist to promote these debates and discussions, but also, you know, we're a social place. We have a library, we have a bar, which I'd encourage you to visit afterwards if you have time. And so yes, I hope you enjoy your visit to the union. Thank you everyone for coming, and I now hand over to the ex-president Michael Beloff, QC, to introduce tonight's speakers. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege for me to moderate this debate, not least because it gives me the opportunity to sit once more in the presidential chair that I last occupied 50.5 years ago. The motion is before the House is that this House believes women running subsistence economies are not entrepreneurs, whatever that may mean. I've been told it is to be UK and Eurocentric. Tonight we're not going to go global. Now, the blog which advertised this event said that the motion was cast in, and I quote, classic Oxonian phrasing. Well, I don't know about classic, since as the President has just told you, it was only 50 years ago that women were actually allowed to become members of the Oxford Union at all. I, as ex-president, had the privilege of moving their admission. The motion was then opposed by the swivel-eyed loons of their generation. That success was one of the first green shoots of the feminist spring, certainly in Oxford, and Cambridge swiftly followed, as ever a little slower off the mark. So I personally look forward to this event when the same blog tells me and you that all the speakers, and I quote, are fast, funny, and feisty. Now, my concern as moderator is not whether they are funny and feisty, but that they should be fast, because we have a strict timetable, which I'm already in danger of jeopardizing. There will be 6 paper speeches in the classic Oxford Union parlance of 5 minutes each. I will ring this buzzer when there is 1 minute to go. I shall ring it twice when the 5 minutes are up, and after 6 minutes, I shall drown out any delinquent speaker. There will be 3 speeches for the proposition and 3 for the opposition, and they will be in sequence: proposition, opposition, proposition, opposition, and then the motion will be open to the floor for approximately 10 minutes for you to make your contribution. Those called upon will be those who are able to catch my eye. Nothing has been prefixed or planted. 1 point per floor speaker is all that I will be able to tolerate, and then there will be concluding speeches for the proposition and opposition, and a vote will be taken at the end. Those who will be in favour of the motion will march through the doors marked aye, and those who are against the motion will march through the door marked noes. And the result will keep you in suspense until we arrive at Somerville, which is our destination for drinks and for dinner. And with that brief introduction, I call upon Penney Frohling to bring forward the motion standing in her name.
We need more female entrepreneurs in the UK. So says Vince Cable and David Cameron and most people that are developing policy. The reason why we need them is that women and engaging women is going to be vital to the turnaround of the UK economy in terms of driving GDP growth and creating much more employment. The fact remains, however, that women in the UK start businesses at less than half the rate of men. Well, we all know why. There's many platitudes that have crept into the common nomenclature. We're not ambitious. We don't build businesses that grow. We don't like math, and we don't study computer science. We don't like risk. We don't take on financing. There's another stark fact that is women are 2 times also as likely as men in the United Kingdom to live in poverty and to see entrepreneurship as an alternative to unemployment. It is time for us in the UK to raise our game in terms of women and entrepreneurship. We can do better than this. We need to stop talking in terms of stereotypes that basically tar an entire gender with inaccuracies and platitudes that potentially actually discourage women from being entrepreneurs. We need to be clear about what we are trying to accomplish with women starting businesses. Entrepreneurs are a highly heterogeneous group. One size does not fit all. If we want to drive employment and GDP growth, we cannot be satisfied with just having subsistence entrepreneurs. We need high growth entrepreneurs, and we need more of them. And we need to have the correct metrics to say, how are we going to measure success? If we take 1% high growth businesses to 2% high growth businesses, the potential for GDP and employment is significant. The challenge is, how do we find these women? Well, they're out there. We interviewed 30 of them, including angel investors, multiple women in all age bands who have created or are creating high-growth businesses. And what they have very clearly said to us is that high-growth entrepreneurship among women is not dependent on having a Y chromosome. They are building high-growth businesses. Many are highly driven by IT. They all talk in terms of scale. They all cite their education, their parents, as being highly instrumental to their level of ambition. They are highly team-oriented. 90% of the businesses we spoke to have mixed teams. Co-founders are men. They attribute diversity to being instrumental to the development of their value propositions. They dispute the fact that we are risk-averse. We are not risk-averse. We simply have a different, more measured sense of risk. Ooh, no. The second thing, they also dispute the fact that we are not ambitious and that we don't grow for growth. What they effectively say is men wing it, men's business cases are less grounded in fact, and that women's business cases are far more trustworthy and far more grounded. Women are also developing businesses that are empathetic to the enormous purchasing power of the female wallet, which is an enormous pool of revenue, and by tapping into women, we're actually growing the pool of fantastic businesses. However, what they do cite is we are not without problems. Funding is a smoking gun. Some people say that it is gender blind. The fact remains that all men, well, the majority of VCs remain men, and women receive lower funding, and it tends to be slower to come through. The second problem is that women, every single woman we spoke to, regardless of age band and regardless of how young or old or the kind of business, cited the astronomical, prohibitive cost of childcare and the fact that they are constrained by the fact they do most of the things at home as a major barrier to engaging more women in the workplace. So as we talk about women who need to lean in more, to take their place in business, we cannot take the same place as men unless men start leaning in equally in the home. Now, from a subsistence entrepreneur standpoint, we applaud all women entrepreneurs, and we are not here to judge. However, the fact remains, subsistence entrepreneurship does not achieve the goal of creating jobs and driving economic growth. Less than 0.5% of subsistence businesses make it to high-growth businesses.
Oh. I now call upon Professor Susan Marlow to oppose the motion.
Thank you for inviting me to speak here this evening. And at the risk of upsetting our sponsors, I'm going to say, do you know, I agree with a lot of what you said. I know, because we're all friends. But however, that doesn't mean that I'm going to take issue, not going to take issue with some of it. What I'm going to focus on is the terms within the proposition. We're talking about women as entrepreneurs. Not the enterprises they create, not the end product. So whether they create these jobs or not, I don't care. But what I do care about is the fact that we are deciding that these women are not entrepreneurs. Now, for me, that creates two great big problems. One, there's a paradox at the heart of what we understand by entrepreneurship, and the other one, I think it's fundamentally sexist. Now, as a professor of entrepreneurship, I sit in my ivory tower, and it's all very well for me to pontificate, but I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs, and the thing I know about them is that they are people who have vision. They see an opportunity, they pursue that opportunity, they take risk with limited resources, they go forwards into uncertainty. That's what entrepreneurship is to me. That's what it means. So the paradox I'm hearing here is that, in fact, only a small segment of these people who start new ventures are actually true entrepreneurs. These high-growth entrepreneurs, these people that create the high value added, that create all the employment. Well, do you know, to be an entrepreneur, you don't need to pass a test. You don't need a degree. You don't need to sit an interview, because do you know what? Anybody can do it. That's the thing about entrepreneurship. But what I'm hearing here is, hang on a minute, in fact, it's not a question of anybody can do it. It's only those people creating that small segment of businesses. I'm sorry, that doesn't chime with my notion, and that creates a paradox. The one thing about entrepreneurship, it's agentic, it's a free-for-all. You can all go out tomorrow, you can all be entrepreneurs. The next thing, the problem with this notion is there's an elite group of people who can be entrepreneurs. It reminds me of some Swedish colleagues that mentioned or made this statement. In fact, in 1989, shows I'm getting on a bit now, they said, do you know what? Entrepreneurship is by men, for men, and about men. And it's time things change, and it really is time that things change. So I think we need to be recognising that women who start subsistence enterprises, and I'm not interested in the outcome of those enterprises, I'm interested in these women as entrepreneurs. These are women, whether they're starting part-time businesses in the home, whether they're middle-class women, or for many of them, as my friend on the bench over here said, are going to be women in poverty. So what type of risk are those women taking with the very limited resources they have? They're taking a very high risk. Are they seeing an opportunity to create a new venture? Whether it's a nail bar or whether it's a software designer, yes, they are. They are seizing that opportunity. Are they being creative? Are they providing a service? Are they adding value? Because this is a big thing about adding value. Yes, they are. If they create half a job, if they create a service in a deprived community that wasn't there before, that's adding value. That is being an entrepreneur. So to me, my image, my vision of this woman who starts her own business, whether it never creates another job, whether it just employs her, and if she gives up a low-wage job, or if she comes off income benefit, that's a huge risk for that woman, because the one thing about your low-wage job or your income benefit, it rolls in every week. There might not be much of it, but it's always there. What's the thing about entrepreneurship? Uncertainty, risk-taking. For me, we need to applaud these women, and we need to celebrate what they're doing, and we don't need to take away their status as entrepreneurs, because I think that's insulting. And what I think is going on here is something that I see all the time now, is because of the high media profile, this populist notion of who this macho entrepreneur is, this person who dominates the newspapers, who dominates the television that we see, that is in fact affecting and biasing our notion of what an entrepreneurship is, who they are, and who they can be. And I would put it to you as an audience, that in fact is not entrepreneurship, that is entertainment. And I think we need to move away from that, and I think we need to recognise, and I think we need to afford due respect to the women who may be investing, risking all that they actually have to try and make a difference to their lives. And I would emphasise again, at the risk of repeating myself, and I will, I don't care what their businesses do. I don't care how many jobs they create, because that's not what we're debating. What we're debating is, are these women entrepreneurs? And that's what I want you to keep in mind when you're thinking about your decision later. And thank you for listening.
Call upon Averil Leimon to second the motion.
One of the problems with women is that we're heterogeneous. We're all different from each other. Look at us. We're all wearing different clothes. We all want to do different things. And one of the most damaging things we can do is not what any other woman is doing. And we wouldn't dream of doing that. We celebrate women doing whatever it is they can and need to do to encourage their family, to boost their income. However, the more that we focus on startups, the more that we plow money into startups without supporting and building and growing high-impact businesses, the more we do women a disservice. I was called this week by a journalist who wanted to interview me for a book as a mumpreneur. I can't even say the word, it sticks in my gullet. This is patronizing. And keeping businesses that women run at this small level, at least in our minds, is doing us a disservice. Nobody ever, as far as I know, has talked about a dadpreneur. So if you notice this sign behind us, the words are power shift. How do we get a true power shift? How do we look at entrepreneurs who innovate, who contribute to the economy, who create jobs, who improve our position in the global economy? And reinvest their wealth in the community to make a big change for women. You may not particularly go for Penney's economic argument, even though it's extremely well argued. I would have a few other arguments as well. My mission has been to change the world one woman at a time. It maybe sounds pompous. I work a lot in leadership in the corporate world. And frankly, I don't know that we're doing that well. We still seem to have to go cap in hand to ask for maybe 25% or 30% representation at the most senior levels in organizations. So one of the reasons I want women to have high-impact businesses is so that they can walk out of that corporate life and set up a different way of working, rather than taking on, and I know we're in a very traditional place, but most businesses are terribly traditional. They're doing it the way it's been done for hundreds of years. It's a male model. And only with high-impact businesses can women begin to write a different style of doing business. So that's one reason to add to the economic reasons. There's also a different way of doing things. And we only get to do that if we have sufficient power. Size does matter, because it's only with size that you begin to get the power that's in economics. And while women are perceived as always really starting at this ground level, we don't have a say-so in much of what we want to impact on. So women can create a new way of doing business. They need to have the power to do that. We've heard mention already about the woman's wallet. I mean, we're 70% of the purchasing power in this country. We make decisions about everything. We're not represented by anyone. My proposition, in addition, is that we should be boycotting these businesses that don't actually know our needs and don't cater to us and our families. And we should be going to the women who are running these big businesses who can supply our every need from a position of knowing what it is that we want and we need. But instead, it's men making those decisions for us. So we need women up there in powerful positions making a difference. Now, there will always be women who are doing the best they can for their families, and we would laud them and support them. But we need both ends, and we need to think about entrepreneurship and segment it differently so that we're putting much more emphasis into building really big businesses and changing the world. Because women don't want power often for the status. They don't want it for the materialism. They usually want it to make a difference in their own lives, in their families' lives, and in the world. So we need women in positions of power to make that shift happen. Because the way things are at the moment, I don't think, despite rules about equality that date back 40 years, I don't see it happening in my lifetime, and I don't see it happening in lots of your lifetimes, unless we make a difference. And that difference is economic and it's powerful. Now, there is this issue about what actually makes women step up like that. And it's not that women are completely lacking in confidence, that they're a weaker species, but there are things that women do differently. And we need to be thinking about how we get women to really step up, to make a high impact. And that means that we do have to get women taking the risks that they're able to take in that balanced way. We need women to be speaking up, to be heard, to be seen. We're not always good at that. We keep it safe. We need women to be bold and to dream big. And so in the words of my fellow countryman, if not in his spirit, as John Knox would say, almost, we need a monstrous regiment of women entrepreneurs to change the world.
I call upon Maggie O'Carroll to speak second against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to you all. And I just want to sort of remind us of what we're debating here tonight. We're really debating the idea of women running subsistence businesses. They're not entrepreneurs. At least this is what our friends in the opposition bench think. And I want just to maybe talk a little bit about, give you an example of one of those subsistence female entrepreneurs. And at the same time, perhaps if I have time, just to maybe reflect on the potential to be a clairvoyant, as our opposition bench might have some talents in that area. But let me just talk about the opposition bench to begin with. And they've fallen into the trap, the absolute trap of assuming and defining entrepreneurship in a very narrow way. Indeed, I have to say that I don't blame them, because all they're doing is following in the footsteps of successive governments who've gone over the hill, had a little look at the rainbow, and chased to the end of that rainbow to get and to nab that pot of gold. And you know what that pot of gold is? It's big, it's the vital big businesses that are going to be created in this country and this economy. Now, as an Irish person, I just want to give you an insight that I have some special insights into the lands of leprechauns and also pots of gold and rainbows. And I just want to assure our colleagues here on the opposition bench that they will be deeply disappointed if they pursue this line, that it is only big business that actually makes a difference within an economy, to the exclusion of all other businesses, and particularly subsistence female entrepreneurs. Because in actual fact, we know, and my colleague later on, who won't rely on mythical interventions, Professor Hart, will talk about the substantive issues and the evidence to back that up. But seriously, moving on from the mythical and the fairy tale land, which I'm afraid our opposition respectfully are living in, I have to say that I'd like to introduce you to an entrepreneur, a subsistence entrepreneur. Laura is her name. She lives in Liverpool, and she lives in Toxteth in Liverpool, and it is one of the most deprived communities in England. Now, Laura has transformed her life through enterprise. She found it difficult to secure a job and employment which would facilitate looking after her daughter. She's a lone parent. And clearly she had a variety of difficulties in terms of leaving school with no formal qualifications. And fundamentally, one of her key skills was the fact that she was a talented baker. So we're meeting all the stereotypes, but let's wait for Laura's story. The reality is that Laura saw a gap in the market. That gap gave her the opportunity to create a range of bespoke baked goods, calorie-free, of course, yes? And those goods are now marketed to both the domestic and the local commercial cafes and restaurants. She's a subsistence business. She's created one job for herself and a part-time job for another woman. But she took risks. She is clearly identifiably an entrepreneur. She had very limited resources. She took risks. She borrowed money from both the credit union and her family. Now, Laura will probably not, and hasn't indicated she's going to grow her business. But fundamentally, that should not exclude her from the being described, as is correctly the case, as an entrepreneur, because she has carried out and undertaken all of the entrepreneurial characteristics that we know to be evident within the entrepreneurial community. So the notion that my colleagues on the opposing bench think that it's okay to delegitimize and to exclude somebody like Laura and many others within businesses run like Laura's up and down the country seems to me to be a very, very narrow take on entrepreneurship. And as we know, what we need a broad spectrum of entrepreneurship within an economy. But as I say, Laura's story in terms of defining, and my criticism, again with respect, is about the narrow definition of entrepreneurship. And that sort of delegitimization, and also the notion that it's particularly troubling that we're now lulled into this false idea that big is better, big is best, big is the only way that we should be going forward in supporting entrepreneurship in this country. So that is a troubling, if not inaccurate, assessment from our colleagues here on the right. So I can only conclude that our opposition must have and must be in the possession of a fully functional crystal ball, and that you've honed your skills in relation to your claim, in relation to being clairvoyants. Because clearly, if we are to pursue to our natural end, as suggested by the opposition panel, that we are to only invest in those businesses that are actually going to create significant large-scale jobs. I'm just wondering how the hell they're going to find them at the beginning. So if we don't support anyone, how are they going to? Are they going to look into that little crystal ball? I didn't bring mine tonight. But as I say, it is a very difficult proposition. In actual fact, successive governments and even our friends in the academic community haven't been able to identify those single nuggets of information to say, here is a body of entrepreneurs. We will pick you, and you're going to be successful. So we say, and we would contend, fundamentally flawed proposition. I have one more minute? Okay. So I just want to basically, again, suggest that I want to rest my case that Laura is an entrepreneur, demonstrating and acting out all of the characteristics of entrepreneurship. And no one should try and take that away from her. So I ask you to support the broad, inclusive, and accurate notion of entrepreneurship, which includes subsistence female entrepreneurs. Thank you.
I thank all these speakers for their excellent and very well-timed speeches, and the motion is now open to the floor. As I say, I won't be able to know whether anyone's in favour of the motion or against the motion before they speak, though I hope I'll be able to detect which it is after they speak. As I say, we have approximately 10 minutes, so 1 minute, 1 point, that's the rule. So, who wishes to start? Hands up. Yes, lady there.
Can I direct the attention to the title on the...
You can do it from where you're standing or sitting. Yes?
And on the pop-up, the expression is power shift. I would say that any woman who brings some power and control into her own life, like Laura, is an entrepreneur, and it's not about scale, it's about power shift.
Lady in the front row in the blue blouse. Yeah?
It's definitely about starting. And if I'm an entrepreneur, I was an entrepreneur the first day I brought Fireworks phone into our house. And if people want to claim me as an entrepreneur now, they have to claim me then. They have to recognize who I was when I started. Just because we've grown doesn't mean we get to be an entrepreneur now.
Yes, the lady at the back.
Thank you so much. So I know a woman who started a nail salon, and then she had
come on, yes. Yes.
Aren't we just labelling women who can't get jobs elsewhere, entrepreneurs, to tidy up the economy? I just wondered if anyone would like to say that.
Right? Lady in the purple, or pink, is it? Pink, yes.
I'm against every genuine big business started small. So we must encourage subsistence entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Yes, a gentleman. Yes. A rare species.
Actually, I support this because there are two different concepts we must make clear. One is entrepreneurs, another is on the way to become one. Okay? So I think there's two different concepts. We must make this is clear. And the character of entrepreneurs is a character. It means it becomes in the future to be a entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur is something you need to really contribute to all job opportunities, all this kind of thing. And it's a good title for the people who are already on the way and get something and success. So I think this group of people can be called entrepreneurs.
Now, there was someone in the same row who was about to speak, and I hope has not been dissuaded by the last speech.
Or has he or she? Yes.
So I have an argument to support the growth side of the story. So I understand that this camp is only supporting the small is beautiful, and here we have a different side. And I believe that in order for us to influence the way this world is run, we need to be able to leverage and to scale our work. So here it is. That's why I believe that we need to think how we can become those businesses, to run those businesses that will bring the change that we want.
Yes. Take it out. Yes, please.
The opposition's arguments seem to depend largely on the way politicians see the world. I seem to remember the arguments they used being espoused by Gordon Brown in 2003, as well as by Ms. Cable somewhat more recently. Does the opposition think it's wise to rely on the UK government, past and present?
Yes.
If one were to take a more global view, one might see that the women who, for example, were in the video shown by Professor Scott this morning, who were growing vegetables in the hills and then paying exorbitant fees to have those same vegetables transported to the village down below, where another group of so-called women entrepreneurs were paying exorbitant prices to purchase those and then on sell. One could argue that these women are not in fact entrepreneurs, that they are in fact exploited.
We've got time for one more. Is there any other? Yes?
If I was to continue from where she left off, if you said the women were exploited, it would be so, but if you looked at it that it actually put some money in their hand into their pockets, then it is something for them and for their livelihood and for their living. So for me, starting small is good enough because women are already disenfranchised a lot. So if you told them that they were to start big and then they don't have the finance, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the necessary networking and support, they would never be there. So to start small and to raise it big, it's good enough for all of us.
I thank all the floor speakers
For their excellent contributions. And now the debate will be wound up. First, we will have Tamara Box ending for the proposition.
Thank you. It's a lot to respond to here. Look, just as the monetary and fiscal policies in the 1950s were the way that we managed our economy, the governments are telling us today that entrepreneurship gives us the opportunity to move into growth again. And they talk about the types of entrepreneurship. Startups are the way to go. And if that's the case, then we need to look at what it is we're actually asking women to do in these businesses. And I think where we're getting caught up in our fantasy land is the idea that startups are enough, that all businesses who start small want to be big, and they don't. The idea that all businesses are the same just because they're run by women. And I think what we in the proposition suggest is that actually all businesses are not the same. And women who start and run subsistence businesses, the baker, Laura, is doing something incredibly laudable. She's feeding herself, she's feeding her family, and perhaps even one or two others. And that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. And there are loads of men and women in subsistence businesses. But that's not what the government is talking about will drive GDP growth, will drive employment. That's not what our policies are aimed at when Gordon Brown and others talk about entrepreneurship. What they're talking about are those businesses that do start small. Every entrepreneurship starts small. Every business starts with an idea, with a replicable idea or a new product, but it must grow. It must be that the DNA of the entrepreneur, the actual ideas behind what they're trying to achieve, are to have an impact. They're impact entrepreneurs. They're growing, building businesses. They want to do something that will change the world, will change their city, will change their environment. They are trying to achieve a growth business. Those are the entrepreneurs that our policymakers are trying to support. The problem is they're confusing them with the subsistence entrepreneurs, and we're tarring everyone with the same brush. So when women go in for funding, when they talk about getting VCs to look at their businesses, the VCs are looking at, are they the candle makers? Are they those who are going to be baking for their local community? Or are they the women that are going to turn into the body shops, the Mrs. Fields, the big businesses of the world? And they can't tell the difference. And our metrics, our definitions don't give us anything to work with. So I would respectfully disagree with Susan. Look, I don't think we get an A for effort in entrepreneurship if we're trying to drive growth. I absolutely believe that women who are out there starting businesses, doing things for their family, getting themselves out of unemployment, off benefit, laudable, fantastic, brilliant. But their efforts are not going to get us the GDP growth. They are not going to get us out of this recession. They are not going to change our global economies in the way that entrepreneurs really will. And it's not all about startups, ladies, and this is where I think we have a real problem. We talk about starting business, but actually what we need to do is look at the funding that's going into existing entrepreneurships. So businesses that are replicable, people that have the nail bar that actually could be Nails Inc. That's where you want to go. You want to put money into those businesses that are replicable. They don't have to be technology. They don't have to be, new products. They can be businesses like Starbucks that was just a business sitting in Seattle until someone got hold of it and said, hey, this is replicable. Let's do something big with that. That's entrepreneurship. That drives employment. That drives GDP growth. And that's what our policies around entrepreneurship are trying to do. Subsistence, developing economies, dealing with women in poverty, that's a very different question and one that is absolutely worthy of being dealt with, but shouldn't be confused with what we're trying to do with GDP growth. I also think we need to worry about how we label women entrepreneurs, how we deal with the labels that are put on them because there are so many women who choose to go into businesses, subsistence businesses, for reasons that have nothing to do with entrepreneurship. They're off-ramping out of their corporate environments to raise children. They're seeking flexibility. They have elderly parents. They are, looking to pursue something that they're, excited about, triathlons. They want to do something to keep their hand in the meantime. Those are the businesses that have a shelf life. They're going to be there for 3 or 4 years. They're going to keep their hand in. They may bake cookies for a while, but then they go back into corporate life. That's great. That's not entrepreneurship. That's subsistence business. That's running something that keeps your hand in. That's a selfish motive. But again, that's not what our policies, what our government are trying to promote when we talk about entrepreneurship being our new monetary policy. And Lord knows, coming from the structured finance environment, we need something new in our monetary policy. So that's what we're after here on the proposition. We're trying to create, work with governments to create those entrepreneurships that will drive GDP growth. And to do that, we have to stop pretending that they're the same as the women who choose to step out of their corporate lives or who are working to get themselves out of poverty or unemployment, or as my colleague suggested, just women who weren't employed start something and now they call themselves entrepreneurs. that's degrading and going to degenerate into having no funding going into those businesses, and keep the world of funders, the world of banks, anybody who's looking at how to scale these businesses, incubators, from looking at those women entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Well, in order to ensure that this debate meets its diversity target, but not only for that reason, I call upon Professor Mark Hart to conclude the case of the opposition.
It's with a heavy heart I stand before you, because I've heard some of my own research massacred in the last 45 minutes. I take responsibility for the 1%. I take responsibility for the high growth debate, a debate which has gone nowhere, should go nowhere, and needs to be put in context. We've been listening to many voices today, voices of women running businesses. And what this proposition is clearly stating is that they do not deserve to be at the high table of entrepreneurship. And the game was given away, or Tamara, when you said subsistence entrepreneurs. You said it yourself in terms of your discussion, and that's exactly what they are. They may be running businesses which are small, but that does not exclude them from a discussion about being an entrepreneur. We've heard the story of Laura, and we've heard directly and indirectly stories of women leading businesses. Now, this is not a proposition about growth. It's a proposition about, does a subsistence business mean that the person running that business is an entrepreneur or not? Let's get clear focus here. We heard the exploitation remark. I'll just quickly deal with it. How many businesses in this room feel exploited every time they're trying to do a deal with Tesco's or Sainsbury's? There's exploitation at all different levels and all different marketplaces. But coming back to high growth, I'm responsible for this. The vital 6%, which we keep hearing about, is something which came off my pen 5 years ago. If you look at the evidence, the majority of jobs in the UK through the recession are created by startups, small micro businesses, and we capture them at a point in time. That's a matter of record. What's interesting is where those businesses go, and here's the thing. We have this very static view, it's either or. But if we look at those businesses over decades, through recessions, we see that those micro businesses, those subsistence businesses, which the opposition don't refer to as anything to do with entrepreneurship, are actually creating the majority of the job growth through the recession. Yes, the 1% that Penney referred to did create 1 million jobs between 2007 and 2010. Yes, I count stuff, that's what I do. But if we look at the startups and the micro-enterprises, what we're dismissing as subsistence businesses, they are at the forefront of keeping jobs and wages, the financial independence of individuals and families walking astride the problems we have out there in the marketplace. This is not an argument to say that high-growth businesses don't count. Of course they do. We want more of them. Let's go from 1% to 2%. But it will not change fundamentally the growth agenda in this economy. But this is not about growth. It's about opportunity. It's about adding value where you can. We heard some stats earlier about women are less likely than men to be in startup businesses, running businesses. Not in rural communities in the UK. Not in social entrepreneurship. There are no gender gaps. There are no gender gaps when it comes to growth. When you compare like for like, because businesses run by women tend to be in different sectors, tend to be run with different startup capital requirements. When you control for that, there are no gender differences. Yes, you're growth-oriented, that's fine. But this is not what this proposition is about. So there's a timing issue. Lord Young published a report last week, and he had a go at me. That's fair enough, deserve it. He called it the vital 95%. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of, in the UK, those businesses which are creating revenue and jobs in our communities and in households. That's the most important point. So, it's the entrepreneurs, stupid. It's nothing to do with growth. To accept this motion what I think will serve to set back the role of women in business for decades. It is insulting. It is ethically wrong. It does not deserve your support. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank on all your behalves all our speakers for an excellent debate, if I may say so with genuine respect, entirely worthy of the great traditions of this historic debating society. We can now relax a little, not too quickly, because your votes will be counted, and it's appropriate and necessary you go through the correct doors that do actually indicate the way in which you've been persuaded, or maybe the way in which you retain the views when you enter the debating chamber. And after that, we go to Somerville College for drinks and for dinner. No doubt you've been told the direction in which to go. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you very much.